Hi and welcome back again. In this video, we're going to be looking at the perfect tense. Perfect, like the present and the aorist, really represents another aspect, another perspective that somebody can take on an action when they're speaking. The perfect aspect views the action as completed, but as having ongoing effects. It's like we use our example of the train again and think about the train having already passed. But now we're in a situation where we'll be late for work. The train, the action, has already taken place, but now we're in a new state that's the effect of the action that was performed. First perfect forms, and there is a second perfect as well. First perfect forms, though, are fairly simple. We have stem change that's quite predictable. It's reduplication, in other words, repetition of the initial consonant of the stem, but this time with epsilon. So the present stem lu, from luo, becomes the perfect stem lelu. The first consonant lambda there is repeated in front with the vowel epsilon. Now, don't be confused between this and me verbs. With me verbs in the present tense, we had reduplication as well, didn't we? Like the stem da becomes didomi. The difference between me verb reduplication and perfect reduplication, though, is that with the me conjugation, our reduplication used the vowel iota. It's didomi. Here, the reduplication of the perfect tense is using the vowel epsilon. It's lelu. Then onto that changed stem, we add the kappa tense marker. So just like we used a sigma tense marker for the first aorist, in the first perfect, we use a kappa tense marker, and then an alpha connecting vowel. Very much like the first aorist used an alpha connecting vowel. So here are the parts of a first perfect active indicative verb. There's no augment. There's the stem with reduplication, lelu, and then the tense marker, kappa, followed by an alpha connecting vowel, and then the personal ending. In this case, I've used a first person plural, and so we have the men ending. And the resulting form is lelukamen. One thing that's worth pointing out here is the lack of an augment. When you're first learning the perfect tense, it's easy to think about the reduplication as if it were an augment. That's going to be a mistake, though, for a couple of reasons. First, the augment always indicates past time. And second, the augment, because it indicates time, only shows up with the aorist in the indicative mood. So if you remember, infinitives, imperatives, and participles with the aorist tense drop the augment. With the reduplication of the perfect tense, though, it's the actual stem that's changing. It's not an augment being added on the beginning. And because it's stem change, the stem reduplication stays around in the non-indicative moods of the perfect. So when we come to perfect infinitives, for example, those perfect infinitives will still use the lelu reduplicated stem, and the le doesn't drop off the way the augment drops off. So augments are stuck on the beginning of an aorist or imperfect verb stem, but the reduplication of a perfect stem is change in the stem itself. The perfect uses our primary active endings, and so in the singular there's no ending. In the second person it was sigma. In the third person either nothing or a movable nu. In the plural it's men, te, and then si, with another possible movable nu to help pronunciation. If we add on the tense marker and connecting vowel, then the first perfect active endings look like this. First person singular is ka, second person singular is kas, Third person singular is ke or ken. And in the plural, we have kamen, kate, and kasi or kasin. Here are some examples of the perfect active indicative forms, first perfect active indicative forms from Luo. So the first person singular would be lelu ka, second person singular lelu kas, and third person singular lelu ke or lelu ken. And in the plural, lelu kamen, lelu kate, and lelu kasi. Those are the perfect active forms, or at least the first perfect active forms. For the first perfect middle, things are even simpler. We have the same kind of stem change, reduplication with the vowel epsilon, and so with luo, we'll still use the perfect stem lelu in the middle tense, or in the middle voice, sorry. But with the middle voice, there's no tense marker and no connecting vowel. And this is where the perfect is quite distinctive, because with the middle, the perfect middle, the personal ending is going to be jammed right onto the end of the stem itself. Let's see what that looks like. Here are the perfect, in other words, the primary middle passive endings. And we've seen these before. Mai, sai, tai, metha, estha, entai. But if we add on the stems, the stem lelu from the verb luo, you can see here we have no connecting vowel and no tense marker in the middle voice. So it's just lelu mai, lelu sai, and lelu tai. Lelumatha, lelustha, and leluntai. Actually quite simple once you know the reduplication of the stem indicates the perfect tense. So we said that the perfect aspect indicates an action that we're viewing as completed but still having ongoing effects, like a train that has passed and now we're in the new position of being late for work. How then do we translate lelu ka, the first perfect active indicative first person singular of luo? Well, sometimes we can translate perfects in English using the helper word have. So we can say, I have released, or I have destroyed, or I have let go. Sometimes the emphasis is more on the fact that the action is past, is over and done with, than it is on the ongoing present condition. And so in those cases, in English, we can translate the perfect with just a simple past. I released instead of I have released. By the same token, sometimes the emphasis falls not on the fact that the action is over and done with, but on the ongoing implications, the ongoing effects of the action. And in those cases, we can use the simple present to translate the perfect tense. And so instead of I have released or I released, we can just say I release. Any of those translations then are valid given the right context. And as usual, we have to look not just at what translations are sometimes appropriate, but at what emphasis there is in each particular use of the perfect tense. And then when we're translating, we have to use the kind of translation that best fits the idea in a given case. There are a couple of tricks with reduplication. And one of these is that when we reduplicate an initial consonant, that initial consonant always is the voiceless version of the consonant group that the consonant is part of. So if we remember our square of stops, we have at the top the labial group of consonants, the ones that are made with our lips, P and beta and phi. And if any of those labial consonants begins the stem of the present tense stem of the verb, then the voiceless version, P, will be used in the reduplication. Here we have phanerao, and the phanera stem begins with a phi, the voiceless fricative version of the labial consonants, but we don't have fefeneroka. We shift from the phi back to the voiceless version, the p, and so we have pefeneroka. Similarly with the velar group of consonants, kappa, gamma, and chi. With the reduplication, if the first consonant is any of these velar consonants, the reduplicated consonant will be the kappa. And so we have, for the stem charis, we have kecharismai in the middle. And finally, the same thing with the dental consonants. The theta at the beginning of the stem of therapeuo is reduplicated as not a theta or a delta, but a tau, the voiceless version, and so it's tetherapeuo. With initial vowels, instead of reduplication, which would be extremely difficult with a vowel, we just lengthen the initial vowel. So agapao in the perfect becomes agapeka. And it's important to notice the kappa tense marker there, because otherwise, if it were agapesa with a sigma tense marker, that could just be an aorist, a first aorist form. Similarly with aiteo, we lengthen the initial alpha to an eta, and in this case, the iota of the I diphthong slips under as an iota subscript, and we move from aiteo in the present to eiteka with an iota subscript in the perfect. An initial diphthong, on the other hand, will often not do anything. So the present heurisco becomes the perfect heureka. There's no difference in the hu initial diphthong. Or eulogeo, I bless, becomes in the perfect eulogeka. Again, no change, no lengthening or reduplication of the diphthong. With an initial double consonant on the stem, often what happens is just that the epsilon, that's the vowel used for reduplication, is added by itself in front of that double consonant. So with gnosko, the real stem we saw is gna, and we have a double consonant at the beginning of that stem, gamma and nu. So instead of reduplicating the gamma, we just add an epsilon on the beginning in front of the gamma. Again, what we have to be aware of is that that's not an augment. It's stem change, and it's the equivalent of the reduplication that's normal for first perfect verbs. So here we have again the kappa tense marker, which reminds us that we're dealing in egnoka, not with an epsilon augment and the aorist tense, but with the equivalent of reduplication and the perfect tense. Finally, with prepositional prefixes, just like with an augment, the reduplication happens after the prefix at the beginning of the main stem of the verb. So the main stem of ekbalo is bal, and so the reduplication will come after the ek, and we get ekbebleka. There are lots of predictable changes here that follow the same sorts of patterns that we see with other tenses. But let's just go over a few of them to refresh our memory. With baptizo, if we add on the perfect middle or perfect passive endings, we end up with bebaptids and the no tense marker, and the my ending jammed right onto the bebaptids stem. That's hard to say, and so the zeta is going to shift to become a sigma. We then end up with the perfect form bebaptismai, I have been baptized. Similarly with gnoridzo, egnorids plus the my ending becomes egnorismai, I have been made known. In some cases, though, with the kappa tense marker, the zeta is just going to drop out. So with sozo, I save, I rescue. In the perfect, we have the perfect stem reduplicated, ses sods, plus kappa, plus the alpha connecting vowel. And so in the first person singular, we end up with sesoka, with the zeta dropping out in front of the kappa. And sesoka means I have rescued. With liquid stems, though, often in the middle, that final liquid consonant will disappear. So apokrinomai, with the liquid consonant nu at the end of the stem, krin, we have the perfect active stem apokekrin, no tense marker, no connecting vowel, but we add the tai middle passive ending on there, and the nu drops out, so we just end up with apokekritai, I have answered. Finally, as we've seen many times before, when we put an ending or especially a tense marker on at the end of a contract verbs stem, the final contract vowel will lengthen. So with agapao, we have agapa, the reduplicated stem, plus kappa plus the alpha connecting vowel. But the alpha at the end of the stem lengthens to an eta. So we have agapeka, I have loved. And similarly with plerao, we have peplera plus kappa plus the alpha connecting vowel. And that omicron at the end of the stem lengthens to an omega. So we have pepleroka, I have kept. Now, there are some situations in which we have slightly different stem change, even though we're still dealing with a first perfect form. So sometimes the stem that is used in the first perfect is actually the same as the second aorist stem. So if a verb uses the second aorist, it may still have a first perfect, but use the second aorist stem. Echo is an example of this, where the second aorist stem was sk, and in the second aorist then we had eskon. That sk stem is the stem we use in the first perfect as well. Here, because it's a double consonant starting the stem, we just add an epsilon instead of full reduplication. But you can see we have the kappa tense marker and the alpha connecting vowel, and the perfect form from echo is eskeka. Similarly with airo, the second aorist stem is which in the actual indicative second aorist forms, that initial epsilon lengthens to an eta, but the stem itself is epsilon rho. And the the perfect tense forms are formed from that stem, and we end up with the form erka in the first person singular. I have taken up, I have taken away. Sometimes instead of regular reduplication of the stem, we end up with some fairly arbitrary stem change, a little bit like the stem changes we saw in second aorist verbs. So balo, which has the aorist stem bal with a single lambda, doesn't use that bal stem, but uses a stem that's something like bla. And so the perfect is bebleka. Similarly, kaleo becomes kakleka in the perfect. Lego, which uses the ape stem in the second aorist, apon, uses an era stem in the perfect. So instead of lelek or something like that, we have ereka. Apokteno, which uses the aorist stem apokten, switches from the ten ending to the stem to a tag ending to the stem, and we have apektenka. And you can see also the shift from apo in the aorist stem to apec in the perfect stem is because we have the epsilon added on in front of the stem in place of reduplication, because the ktag stem begins with a kappa tau, a double consonant. Something similar happens with apostello, where instead of apostel, we have apestal with an alpha lambda, apestalka in the perfect. Angelo, which uses the angel stem in the aorist, becomes angelka, and the stem there is angel. Horao in the perfect becomes heoraka. Hurisco, instead of the aorist stem hur, uses a hura stem, so we have hureka in the perfect. And pino, instead of using a p stem like the aorist, uses something like a pa stem, probably with an omicron, and we end up with the form pepoka in the perfect. Second perfects are a little bit easier than second aorist verbs, because the only difference from the first perfect is the lack of a kappa tense marker. So with fugo, we have pefuga with no kappa. With grapho, we get gegrapha with no kappa. In both cases, we have regular reduplication here, and we use the same alpha connecting vowel that we use in the first perfect. So the only difference with the second perfect is the lack of that kappa tense marker. In some cases, we have the kind of irregular stem change that we saw with some first perfects, but again, no kappa tense marker, and we consider these second perfects as well. So akuo becomes akikoa in the perfect. Ginamai becomes gegona in the perfect, I have become. Erkamai becomes elelutha, I have come, or I have gone. Lambano becomes elepha, I have taken. And kradzo becomes kakraga, I have called, or I have cried out. The nice thing about the second perfect, though, is that we only have to worry about the second perfect in the active voice. Why? Because there's no kappa tense marker anyway in the first perfect middle passive. So all perfect middle passive verbs act the same way. We have stem change, no tense marker, no connecting vowel, and the primary middle passive endings jammed right on the end of the stem. It's only in the active voice that we have to watch and see whether we have reduplication and the kappa tense marker, or just reduplication, or just some other kind of stem change. And with the second perfects then, where there's irregular stem change, like with the first perfects, we have to recognize the perfect stem, but that's going to be even more important with second perfects because of the lack of that kappa tense marker. You can learn more about the Greek perfect tense in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek or Wallace's Basics of New Testament Syntax, and I've given you the page numbers in Mounce's 3rd edition and in Wallace's 1st edition.